Following a contentious election, what does the future hold for Kenya? Britain's Prince Harry leads the call for youth inclusion in HIV policy. And one of the world's largest diamonds fetches $6.5 million to aid Sierra Leone. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCorry. This is Africa 54. Now, crowds of supporters of the Shia Houthi movement turned out in Yemen's capital Sana'a on Tuesday to celebrate the groups taking control over the city and the killing of ex-President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Houthi militia and supporters on Monday set fire to their former allies' home and celebrated in the streets. Witnesses reported that fighting had subsided in the Yemeni capital Sana'a hours after the announcement of Saleh's death.
It's more relaxed in the streets today. The people are relaxed and it's good news. Of the leader of the militias which tried to make chaos and disruption for us and sell us out to the Saudi aggressors. And of course, Ali Abdullah Saleh was the last card the Saudi-led coalition had to play.
Well, Saleh's party confirmed his death on Monday as a video showing what appeared to be his corpse circulated on social media. His death comes 2 days after the alliance appeared to have fallen apart. On Saturday, Saleh denounced the Houthi militia and suggested restoring ties with Saudi Arabia. Now to East Africa, a prominent strategist for Kenya's opposition who has strongly criticized President Uhuru Kenyatta and called for some parts of the country to secede was released on Monday after being briefly detained on suspicion of inciting violence. Kenya's public prosecutor said on Twitter that Ndii had been released on police bond and that appropriate action will be taken after investigations are completed. Pro-democracy groups said his arrest raised concerns about freedom of expression. Opposition leader Raila Odinga condemned the arrest, saying it is designed to intimidate and fragment Kenyans. Uhuru Kenyatta won a repeat presidential election on October 26th that was boycotted by Odinga. Odinga said the election commission had failed to carry out sufficient reforms, and he now maintains that Kenyatta's election was a sham and his rule is illegitimate. He has vowed to bring the government down through the power of the people. So, what does the future hold for the East African nation? For some thoughts on that, I'm joined in studio by Jared Okello. He's a member of parliament from the opposition Orange Democratic Movement. Honorable Okello, member of parliament from Raried Nyando constituency. We are happy to have you with us in the studio.
Thank you, Vincent.
So just mentioned, first David Ndii, that is his full name, has been released. First, do you see any kind of trend in the coming days where actually members of the opposition could be arrested for expressing themselves?
Well, thank you, Vincent. This is not a new phenomenon in the Republic of Kenya. It began days preceding the 8th of August elections, an election that was impugned and vitiated by the Supreme Court. So we have seen constant harassment by the police with the directives from the Jubilee top administration. All these that we have seen are pointers towards intimidation and instilling fear on Kenyans who have continually asked for freedom and electoral justice. That has been thwarted by Jubilee, Uhuru Kenyatta, Ruto, and the coterie around them. But, you know, democracy is not easy to attain, and it doesn't belong to those who are fearful.
Now, there's some, of course, who are looking forward to the 12th of December. Right. And, of course, some would say that is a very important day to them, those who are supporters of the opposition leader, Raila Odinga. First, what do you think that the kind of message that sends, that Raila Odinga will be sworn in by the people on a holiday, on a public national holiday in Kenya?
Well, you did allude to the arrest of Brother Ndii. Ndii had gone to Mombasa at a time when he had just been empaneled as part of the committee that will be steering the People's Assembly's composition with the hallmarks of swearing in of Raila Odinga as president on the 12th of August. Now, firstly, and he was arrested without a arrest warrant. There was no search warrant as well. He was abducted by police officers, driven to Nairobi. His wife and family abandoned in Mombasa. And you know, all these are meant to, you know, dissuade Kenyans to deluded into thinking that that is something that cannot actually happen. But this is what will happen on the 12th. Raila Odinga has stated it quite categorically, together with his team, that the Constitution is supreme. And the Constitution, or rather the constitutional part that gives him the latitude to be sworn into office, is derived from Article 1, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, which actually says that the sovereignty is, the sovereign power is bestowed on the Kenyan people, but can only be exercised through duly elected representatives. But and Kenyans are therefore donating that sovereignty to their duly.
But let's face it, Mr. Raila Odinga did not participate in the October 26th election, and therefore didn't get elected. So does he still have the authority to be sworn in, even by the people, when he did not actually participate in an election? He's not elected.
Well, this is exactly what happened. Raila pulled out of the election, or rather abandoned the election, because the quest to have a clean electoral merchandise wasn't forthcoming. The Constitution, together with enabling laws, and the authority that was derived from the Supreme Court, actually necessitated IEBC as the electoral body to stop the impending election of the 26th and carry out fresh nominations. Because one of the issues that were being raised was that, you know, we did not have sufficient time to make up to changes within the electoral body. And therefore, Raila's abandonment of the election necessitated a new fresh nomination that would then have had an election 90 days from the day he chickened out. Now, IBC, together with Jubilee, chose to read the law very selectively, proceeded with that election.
So because of time, so do we see what plans are ahead for the opposition as actually leading the country to real democracy?
Well, as I said, democracy is expensive. There are certain sacrifices that must be made in order for it to be attained. What we are saying is that the sovereign will of the people must be exercised on the 12th. And Raila Odinga, together with the NASA fraternity, of course, you know, when that election was carried out, only 3.5 million people were positively identified by the KIEMS machines, meaning, therefore, that out of 19.6 million voters, only 3.5 had the wherewithal, the quest to come out to vote in Uhuru Kenyatta. So that is a very harsh indictment on the legitimacy and the very ab initio of Uhuru Kenyatta's presidency. And therefore, you are not going to sideline 16.1 million people who never participate in an electoral process. And have Uhuru Kenyatta have it all.
Yeah, unfortunately, we may have to carry on with this conversation another time. Thank you very much. And we'll really try to understand even better how best to move forward, Kenya.
Thank you.
Honorable Okello, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
That's Jared Okello, who's a Kenyan Member of Parliament from the opposition Orange Democratic Movement. Well, in a victory for U.S. President Donald Trump, the Supreme Court has decided to allow his latest travel ban to remain in force while the legal fight continues in the lower courts. 2 of the 9 justices said the partial stay on the ban should continue. The court did not give a reason for its decision. The travel ban, the third one Trump has issued, bars most travelers from 8 countries: Chad, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. 6 are Muslim-majority nations. Lower court judges in Maryland and Hawaii have blocked, or rather had blocked, the travel ban from being enforced. Now, a spokesman for the Council on American Islamic Relations said the Supreme Court's actions today are a good reminder that we can't simply rely on the courts to address the Trump administration's efforts to marginalize Muslims and other minorities. Now, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments for and against the Trump travel ban as soon as the issue has made its way through the lower courts. Now, the United States Africa Command is responsible for U.S. military operations in and relations with the African continent. Through multinational exercises and military-to-military engagements, AFRICOM is intended to strengthen relationships with its African partner nations to build the defense capabilities of their security forces. VOA Pentagon correspondent Calabab spoke with Chief Master Sergeant Ramon Colin Lopez, the command senior enlisted leader for headquarters of AFRICOM, about its mission in Africa.
We train a lot of Africans, both in the maritime and land realm. We're helping them build their air forces to be able to transport and ensure proper logistics systems to be able to be synchronized from country to country. And we also help from the state side, the Department of State side, to improve governance in a lot of these regions.
I want to also ask you about the other things that U.S. troops are doing in the Lake Chad region. What can you tell us about what we're doing there and about the threat in that area?
So that is clearly an area where Boko Haram operates. And if you look at the AFRICOM's lines of effort, that is line of effort number 3, to go ahead and contain Boko Haram. Clearly, Boko Haram has been causing a lot of trouble for the local governments, and as partners working with those governments, we are training, advising, and assisting their forces to be able to get after African solutions to African problems.
The youth bulge, the number of unemployed men that are going to be around in the coming years and expanding in the coming years in Africa, that's a ripe pool for a group like Islamic State. Are you concerned that a place in Africa could be the next place where Islamic State tries to make their so-called caliphate?
So I equated it in a conversation to having a puddle of water and dropping a cinder block in the middle of it. That's what we ended up doing in the Middle East when we got after ISIS. We ended up dropping a great instrument of military power, and we're crushing them. Now, that water that got dispersed has to go somewhere. Maybe going to the Pacific, maybe going into the Africa and Europe areas of responsibilities. While we could not pinpoint any specific location where the heartland is going to be or their so-called caliphate, I will tell you that any country that has got a youth bulge at this time is got to be a concern to us, because there are few opportunities, there's even fewer hope, and you can see by the migration numbers and the instability in some of those countries that when you have no options, and here comes an extremist that is offering you a motorbike and a bride, what do you think you're going to do? Your family's starving, you can't provide for them, and somebody's giving you an option. And you don't have the means to migrate, because migration costs money. Migration is leading into slavery up in Libya. We're seeing that right now in open source. So the poor African people are having very little options to go ahead and progress in life. So of course we're concerned about those numbers, and we're concerned about that youth bulge.
I just want to wrap up, and I know you don't want to rank the threats, but it would be important to our audience to know where you personally are most worried about in Africa.
I worry about the outposts that have U.S. military members that are getting after this threat. And it can be 5 different countries. You know, I worry about them because we can see what happened out there when the enemy decides to overpower the United States of America. And everybody's looking for an advantage in combat. And one side is going to win, and one side is going to come out basically figuring out what they need to do next to go ahead and be better than who they were that day. So if you ask me about things that I worry about the safety of our men and women and making sure that we're providing them with every single asset so that they have a fighting chance when that time comes. Because that's who we are. We're a Department of War, and we get after those things. It's not easy, and it's extremely dangerous. So my charge, if I need to worry about something, I need to make sure they got everything they need. And if they don't have it, to come here and advocate for it. But what I will say is that if you're one of those enemies, Al-Shabaab, AQIM, the Islamic State, Boko Haram, we will come after you, and we will get you. And we will make sure that the Africans get after you, and they will get you. That is our charter in Africa, and that is what we'll do.
VOA's Pentagon correspondent Calabab speaking with Chief Master Sergeant Ramon Colin Lopez. Want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover? Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, including the vulnerabilities of young people in the global fight against HIV and AIDS. Stay with us.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Well, scientists, health activists and policymakers are gathered in Ivory Coast's capital this week for a major AIDS conference, the International Conference on AIDS and Sexually Transmitted Infections in Africa, or ICASA, will focus on ways to end the pandemic on the continent. This year's theme is Africa Ending AIDS, Delivering Differently. Our health correspondent, Lino Medu, is at the conference in Abidjan and joins us live via Skype. Good evening, Lino.
Hello, Vincent.
Yeah, now first,
as you mentioned, there's excitement here in Abidjan a couple of days after the end of the EU-AU summit. It's now the 19th International Conference on AIDS and STIs, ICASA 2017. More than 5,000 people are gathered here in Abidjan to assess the global fight against HIV/AIDS, but primarily what is happening in Africa. As you know, the HIV/AIDS is infecting millions of people around the world, and many of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. So there is a lot going on here. Researchers, doctors, civil society, advocates are gathered to recommit efforts for an AIDS-free generation in Africa.
Yeah. Now, we know that in this kind of conferences, a lot gets to be discussed. Up to this point, what has stood out? What has stood out?
Really, one of the main focus here is the issue of prevention of mother-to-child transmission. It has been a main focus. We have several first ladies that are attending the conference, and that they have made that one of the key issues for them to work on. And the first ladies have an organization called UPDAS, and what they do is to fight against HIV/AIDS, and they are really committed to ensure that no child gets born with HIV/AIDS moving forward, because there are all the tools and treatment to prevent that from happening. Now, and also they're talking about funding. They talk about new strategies, but one of these strategies will be access to funding, and it will be critical in terms of assuring that Africa really wins the fight against HIV/AIDS.
And we know that these conferences have taken place over the years. What are they talking about? What has been achieved, and therefore how to move from there forward?
A lot has been achieved. When you look at some statistics, for example, access to treatment, treatment for prevention, there are more people on treatment than before. But moving forward, one of the key issues is the 90-90-90 targets by UNAIDS, which is by 2020, 90% of people that are infected by HIV/AIDS should know their status, and those who know their status, 90% of them should be on treatment, and for those who are on treatment, 90% of them should be virus suppressant. So, which means that if we are able to achieve this target by 2020, it will be a big step in the fight against HIV/AIDS. So this approach is really, really essential. Also, the fact that young women are getting infected, the infection rates is increasing among the youth population. And that is a serious issue that they're really trying to address. More than 300,000 adolescent girls and young women were newly infected in 2016. And that's a serious issue when you think about the global fight against HIV/AIDS. So the main focus is about access to reproductive health and access to young women's rights and women's rights in general, because you look at the issue of gender-based violence, that's one of the reasons why there is also an increase in new infections, and many other issues, really, the lack of access to reproductive health in some contexts that young women don't have. They are not educated to know how to prevent the virus from infecting them, and many other repercussions.
Excellent reporting, Lenore. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Vincent.
That's Africa 54's health correspondent, Lenore Maduro, reporting live via Skype from Abidjan, Ivory Coast, where she'll be all week. Now, governments must do far more to include the vulnerabilities of young people in the global fight against HIV and AIDS. That's according to a new report. Despite progress in tackling the disease, it is estimated that 1,700 new HIV infections occur every day among young people around the world. And the problem is particularly acute in Africa. As Henry Ridgewell reports from London, it is hoped the issue will gain added publicity thanks to Britain's Prince Harry.
Florida Uzoaru runs a business providing online sexual health services. The young Nigerian entrepreneur says many clients prefer the privacy offered online.
There's already a lot of stigma around sex in general, and also we haven't really done a lot of sensitization about testing of all kinds.
Campaigners say many adolescents in Africa are unaware of their HIV status and afraid to get tested. 23-year-old Masedi Kewa Modimo was born with HIV. Both her parents died from AIDS. Growing up in her native Botswana, Masedi grew frustrated with the barriers she faced and decided to reveal her HIV status in order to campaign for better treatment.
It's one of the most difficult thing I've ever faced in my whole life. Every single day I face stigma. People talk about it because, one, they fear it. Two, they assume certain people within our society have it. Three, they feel that they cannot welcome people who are living with HIV and AIDS.
Professor Rashida Ferrand co-authored the new report.
We really need to be thinking about all the barriers at every step in that broad environment, both at facility level and in clinics, etc., but also recognizing the fact that most of the time young people do not spend in facilities. So we have to think of modifying the environments and the barriers that those environments place.
The charity Sentebale helped put together the policy recommendations. Its co-founding patron is Prince Harry, newly engaged to American actress Meghan Markle, who has also campaigned on health issues in Africa. Earlier this year, the Prince chaired a meeting in London on adolescents living with HIV, titled Let Youth Lead.
Young people, the first time they know or the first time they hear anything about HIV and AIDS is probably by the time it's too late. Whether it's in the education system here in the UK, whether it's across Africa, whether it's across the world, HIV needs to be treated exactly the same as any other disease.
Activists hope the royal couple's star power will help them spread the vital message that young people's needs and fears must be addressed in the global drive to tackle HIV and AIDS. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. What's the connection between a giant diamond and Sierra Leone? We'll be right back. We'll let you know.
في رأيي لو أن الإدارة الأمريكية أقدمت على نقل السفارة الأمريكية.
repeat the success we have achieved in the ban of plastic carrier bags.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. How to keep a beard smelling clean and fresh after eating messy food has long been a conundrum facing bearded gentlemen. But a new beard perfume could be the answer. Now, the pocket-sized product is just one of the many grooming products available at London's annual Gentleman's Grooming Show in London. A 50-milliliter bottle of Beard Doctor costs about £50 and smells of mint and patchouli. It also includes argan and eucalyptus oils to keep beards soft and glossy. You may not want to stock up on this item because, according to many in the industry, the beard might soon be on the way out. Well, next up, at the Tech Crunch in Berlin, the first concept car in the world designed for ride-sharing. Moya is 1-year-old sub-brand of Volkswagen. Ride-sharing has been available for some time through a number of tech companies such as Uber, Pool, or Alligator Shuttle. But the Moya project is the first time a major car manufacturer is getting involved in the process of creating the cars for the services themselves. Now, the company is planning to start a test phase of the service next year in Hamburg. Also on display is the Stark electric skateboard. It boasts a top speed of 32 kilometers per hour and a range of 19 kilometers on each charge. Well, and finally, board games have been gaining popularity among seniors in the rapidly aging country of South Korea as a simple and effective way to reduce risks of Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. With seniors above 65 old making up 14% of its population, by the end of 2016, South Korea has officially become an aged society. It is projected that 1 in every 10 South Koreans aged 65 or older will be suffering from Alzheimer's by the end of this year. As part of such efforts, many older adults in the country have opted to play board games like a cup stocking, which is both easy to learn and fun to play to help preserve their motor skills and boost their brain power. And that is what is trending today. Now, Sierra Leone's Peace Diamond, the 14th largest diamond in the world, has sold for just over $6.5 million at a New York auction. Sierra Leone says it will fund development projects with the proceeds from the auction. This was the government's second attempt to sell the 709-carat uncut gem after rejecting a bid slightly over $7 million, saying it failed to meet its own valuation at an initial auction in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, in May. The giant gem was unearthed in Corriedou in March by a Christian pastor who gave it to the government. And that's our show for today. Now, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. And for more news, tune in to Viewers Evening Radio Show Africa News Tonight, 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. An envelope is a flat paper container used to send a letter. So what could it possibly mean to
push the envelope?
There has got to be more to this expression.
Did you see what Adam is wearing today?
Yeah, well, he has always liked bright colors.
That guy really likes to push the envelope. I could not get away with wearing that to work.